Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week I am finally going to get some paint on the car. Okay, first things first, I have to go around the booth again because this cheap 100-mile-an-hour tape I've got has all fallen off, or a lot of it has fallen off. So I have to try and stick it on again and hopefully press it down harder or something and see if I can get it to stick. Let's see how we go. All right, I've gone around and retaped everything up, and this time I really tried to get the best adhesion I could. The issue is that I've used this booth before, so there's dust on it and it's just hasn't stuck perfectly. So fingers crossed, I've got it sorted now. But the next thing I need to do, as you can see, it's quite dark in here, so I need to organize my lighting. And last time, as you may remember, I had a bunch of fluoro tubes set up around the booth. This time I thought, well, I want to try something a bit different. The lighting wasn't amazing, and also I've used a lot of the fluoro, so I don't have them, so I have to buy more. They're actually not that cheap to buy, and I was looking at alternatives, and I thought, well, actually a safer method might actually be using LEDs. And thankfully my eBay order came in really quickly, and I bought a bunch of these strip LEDs. So they peel out, and these ones are the waterproof version, so they've got like a rubbery coating over the whole thing. So hopefully these should be a lot safer, a lot less likely to ignite the fumes that are going to be in here. So I'm going to go through now and mount up these onto these pieces of timber I've got. That way that they are removable, and mount them up around the sides. As far as these go, I basically worked out that one fluoro tube of basically 1 meter long gives out about the same amount of lumens as 3 meters of this stuff. And I have 40 meters here, so basically I've got roughly double the amount of light that I had in the last one, and hopefully because I can spread them around the booth a bit more, it probably gives better coverage, I'm hoping. And anyway, we'll see if it works. So fingers crossed, let's start laying these out onto these boards and start putting up some lights. All right, I don't know how well the camera is going to pick this up, but I set these both lots of lines up, and on one end I've used this splitter that they came with to the power source and split it into two, and that runs pretty well. I tried the other way because they're actually designed so you can plug the ends into each other, and this one I used the single power source again, but this time I actually looped them together at the far end. And if you can see here, I didn't actually realize how these work, but obviously the power gets less the further it goes. So obviously this is the start of the run, and then it loops around, then comes back, and this is the end of the run, and it's much, much duller. Whereas using the splitter, it doesn't seem to lose as much at the other end. It still gets duller at the far end, which is probably hard to see, but not as bad as the looping them together. So I'm going to use the splitters on these now, and this brings me up to the last one. The last one needs to go across the ends of the booth. Okay, I've got all my LED boards laid out now, and before I put them up, one last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run over them with just some clear packing tape, run over the top, because I want to be able to keep using these in the future. So this will give me a layer that I can just peel off later and get rid of any overspray, because overspray gets everywhere. So at least then I won't have messed up lights. But it should also hopefully help when it's upside down, just give it a bit of extra adhesion so they don't peel off over time like I had with the rest of the 100 mile hour tape. So do these and then I'll start putting them up. All right, I've got all these laid out. They've got their tape covering over all of them, and now it's time to take some cable ties and put them up and see what they look like. All right, so that's all up, and I've walked all the way around the car. Could there be more light? Absolutely, but I'm actually looking all the way around. It seems like the whole car is quite well lit, and I think that will be well and truly good enough to do this spray job. I'm not huge on the colour of light. I wouldn't want to do any colour matching in here, but I think it should definitely at least show up everything I need it to see. So now I need to finalise all the wiring, tidy it up, and then I can move on. But I'm calling that a win. Okay, a lot of you will have seen I put these flares on earlier, and one of the reasons I bought them in the first place is because I really like the fact that they're plastic, they're really flexible, and the biggest issue I was having with them was, well, a couple of issues really. This front corner, I wasn't happy with how I had to try and line it up with the car. It just didn't fit properly, and the other issue I'd actually noticed was that because the car is curved, and these are designed more for a car that's flat, it would actually, if you looked along the side of the car, the top would be slightly more in than some of the sides. They'd sort of come out and then go in and then come back out again, and I just didn't like it. So I bit the bullet and I went and I ordered some fiberglass copies of the ZG flares. So these are the original ones. They line up much better. I want to just quickly try and fit these up and screw these in before I start getting the body ready for paint. The next thing I've just noticed with these rear flares, it's something that I didn't notice until I got the ZG flares, is that if you have a look at where the flare is and where the wheel is, the flare is actually offset towards the rear. It stands out now because this is a universal flare, so it's even on both sides, so you can really see how far offset to the rear it is. I'll just quickly take these off. So that brings me to the ZG flares. So I've got a couple of the flares here, and none of them were labelled, so I was sort of trying to fit them on the car, and obviously they're fiberglass, so they're not a perfect fit. They need a little bit of tweaking like every fiberglass part. And there's a few guys out there with Zeds who've actually put their flares on, I've seen, the wrong way around. Because if you have a look here, a lot of people will look at it and go, well, okay, there's actually, so this is a bit narrow on this side and a bit large on this side. It's sort of, it's hard to see it, but this is actually accentuating the flare too far to the rear. So this flare here is actually the flare for the other side. And because they're not labelled, you wouldn't know. This flare here, you can actually see that the curve is sort of tapers out this way and it's sharper on this end, so it brings the whole curve forward and it centralises the flare over the wheel, and that means this is the right flare for this side. All right, let's mount it up. Okay, I've mounted it all up and marked it all out, so now it's ready to cut out. All right, guys, wheel arches are done. Everything is ready to go, prepped and ready to go. So as a lot of you have pointed out, and a lot of you have mentioned, that there's a light surface rust starting on this car, just because it's been sitting bare metal for a while. I wasn't overly concerned. Light surface rust is nothing drastic, and it's going to happen when it's left bare metal. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over and I'm going to use a DA sander over the whole thing to knock a lot of the rust back before we get in and doing our rust converting. I've used wax and grease remover over the whole thing, cleaned up all of the surfaces nicely, and now I'm just going to use some of this basic rust converter. I just got it from Super Cheap Auto. Go over the whole car with this. You have to leave it for about 15 to 30 minutes, and what this does is it finds any rust that's left over and converts it, turns it black, and basically neutralizes all the rust so that it's stopped, it's dead, it's not going to go any further. So once that's all dead, then I can actually put paint on the car. So while I wait for that all to do its job, I'm going to go through and just start masking. I'm only just doing a really quick, dodgy mask. I'm not going to town. We're just sealing in the metal. That's all we're doing for now. So let's get masking. So after the world's worst masking job, I really slapped it up and really didn't do a very good job at all. But anyway, the masking is done for now, and the rust converter has done its job and converted all the rust. I don't know if you can see here the black spots wherever there was little bits of rust. It's all gone black, which means it's neutralized all that rust. So now it's time to get the rust converter off, which means going over with 3 cloths. A damp cloth, just damp with water, then a cloth soaked in methylated spirits, and then a dry cloth. Bang, 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 all 3 in a row. You don't want to leave it with just the damp surface, because then it's going to rust again pretty quickly. So damp cloth, metho cloth, dry cloth, let's clean it all off. There's still a bit of residue on there, and no matter what you do, always before you paint, wax and grease remover. So we'll go over and we'll give it a good wax and grease remover over the whole thing, and then we're ready to paint. So the car is ready to paint, and that means it's time to put some epoxy on. And I'm lucky enough, I've managed to team up with Concept Paints for this build, which is awesome, because they're actually the paint supplier I used to paint the 911. You can see that old tin there that's well used. But we're going to go through and use their paint system for this whole car. First thing we're going to do is we're going to hit it with some epoxy primer. So the epoxy primer goes straight onto bare metal. At least then I can put it on, and then I can do my body filler and stuff over the top. I just need to seal in that bare metal, and that's what this is going to do. And stop it from rusting anymore. So let's start mixing it up 4 to 1. I've got my mixing cup. Let's start mixing. All right, paints mixed, filtered and in the gun. I just use a basic, just a Chinese copy. I think it's a copy of an Iwata or something like that. It's got a 2mm tip. You can use some really expensive guns and they're really good, but I found these guns, this gun cost me maybe $150 Australian, so it's, you know, not an expensive gun, but it did the 911 fine, and I'm happy enough with the results. You can get better, it's not perfect, but for the money I'm pretty happy, so let's put some paint on the car. All right, and we have some paint on the car. It's just the epoxy primer. I didn't really care about overspray too much because everything's getting painted anyway. So it was just a really quick coat of epoxy to seal it in so it's not gonna rust anymore. And look at these lights now. I don't know why I chose the cool white. I really should have chosen the warm white, or at least maybe half and half. Either way, it's done now, and so I have my cool disco lighting in my booth. But I've run out of time this week, so I suppose that's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, in 1958, the Datsun 1000 sedan won its class in the Around Australia trial. And this class was for vehicles of 1000 cc's or less. This race was the most severe durability race in the world at that time. It was a grueling event that started in Sydney, headed down to Melbourne and then circled the continent clockwise in order to pass through Sydney again and to finish up in Melbourne. All up, it was roughly a 10,000 mile event. Only the onboard crew were allowed to work on the car, and it really was a race of attrition. There were 67 cars who started out and only 34 finished. Winning this, Datsun's first ever race outside of Japan, was a massive achievement in proving the quality and durability of the brand throughout the world.
All right, guys, that's it for another week, and we have some paint on the car. It was a mad dash trying to get it all in there, but now I can actually see a lot more of where it's pretty good and where it's not that good. So that's a great way to start, but it's getting there, it's coming together. As always, if you want to help the channel out, head down to the description below and you can pick up some shirts, hoodies, or coffee mugs. Also, please like and subscribe to Home Built by Jeff, and you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at the same place. See you guys.
It's